Indictment of HRM Elizabeth I. Emily Elizabeth Windsor-Cragg Friday, May 27, 2016. Indictment of HRM Elizabeth E. and her royal family for a charge of treason and claim to UK throne. Royal duties as a constitutional monarch. Coronation oath, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth E. June 2, 1953. Contents: June 2, 1953. Coronation vows. Reign versus rule. Defaults in royal covenant obligations as if non-existent. Adding efforts to confuse the public, a political strategy for world dominance. Looking away, not seeing EU-hegemony as predation on peoples. Pedophilia, human trafficking and serial wars, ALL in fact just bidness, no one accountable for harm. Debt and class bankruptcies, bank usury and investment fraud are running rampant. Uncorrected. Wars for profits and profits occur for PC population reduction en masse, genocide and omnicide at work, radiological contamination. The Crown is a primary purveyor, processor and marketing agency for reactive and depleted uranium used in fission reactors and armaments in the world. Laws of marriage and bloodline. Tavistock Institute's goal to overrule morality and civil ethics. UNESCO's Common Core Sex Ed curricula. Parties of the first part, in the royal succession. Looking to a future to live in. June 2, 1953, Queen's coronation vows. Reign versus rule. Transcript of the original coronation video. Herein is the dialogue between the Queen and officials of the Church of England at Her Majesty's coronation, dedicating herself before God, to the service of her subjects. Madam, is your Majesty willing to take the oath? HRM states, I am willing. Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, according to their respective laws and customs? HRM states, I solemnly promise so to do. Will you to your power, cause law and justice in mercy to be executed in all your judgments? HRM states, I will. Will you, to the utmost of your power, maintain the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel? Will you to the utmost of your power, maintain in the United Kingdom, the Protestant Reformed religion established by law? Will you maintain and preserve inviolable, the settlement of the Church of England, and the doctrine, worship, discipline and government thereof, as by law established in England? And will you preserve unto the bishops and clergy of England, and of the churches there committed to their charge, all such rights and privileges as by law do or shall appertain to them or any of them? HRM states, all this I promise to do. HRM states, the things which I have herebefore promised, I will perform and keep, so help me God. Treason. Not paying attention to conflicts of interest. Is this clear enough? In a constitutional monarchy, it is members of Parliament who rule by law, legislation of law and statute codes while the sovereign reigns. The monarch serves a function similar to checks and balances in the United States Constitution. So Parliament is charged with crafting statutes, once the foundational laws for the country are in place. It is fitting under such a constitutional monarchy for the King or Queen to operate by powers listed below. Executive power of the Queen or King of Britain. The power to choose and dismiss a Prime Minister. The power to dismiss ministers in the government, dissolve Parliament and call for new elections. The power to enact laws and or veto legislation passed by Parliament. The power to issue proclamations with Parliament's consent. The power to exercise Crown prerogatives, including declaration of war and emergency. The right to read confidential government documents and intel reports, to advise and to warn. The power to elevate or exile individuals. Pardon convicted felons, grant and bestow titles and honors, where she herself is immune from accusations of conflict of interest. This is a debatable issue due to the fact the royal family retinue reflect back on the monarch's character. And there have been many unscrupulous, perfidious, deceitful monarchs in our history to date. Royal duties as a hospitality P.R. executive as articulated in annual financial reports of Buckingham Palace, there is no correspondence or similarity between Her Majesty's powers and the actual carrying out of functions she routinely performs. The Queen serves as corporatist mascot of state and only includes ceremonial aspects of leadership, no judgments or problem-solving or decision-making is included, as recorded in the following activities in the 2011 Annual Report undertaking constitutional duties, for example the state opening of Parliament, regular audiences with the Prime Minister, meetings of the Privy Council, giving royal assent to legislation and approving many appointments, fulfilling constitutional responsibilities in relation to the Scottish Parliament and, where appropriate, the Welsh and Northern Ireland Assemblies, carrying out state and royal visits overseas and receiving state and official visitors to the United Kingdom, receiving credentials from foreign heads of mission, and presenting honours at investitures. In addition, the role of the Queen, supported by members of the royal family, extends more widely than these formal duties and includes providing a focus for national identity, unity and pride, for example on Remembrance Sunday and at times of national celebration or tragedy, providing a sense of stability and continuity, for example by participating in traditional ceremonies such as trooping the colour, recognizing success, achievement and excellence, for example through visits, receptions and awards, and contributing through public service in the voluntary sector to the life of the nation. In this area the Queen is particularly supported by the work of other members of the royal family, for example the Prince's Trust and the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme. Citation 2011 Annual Financial Report of Buckingham Palace, page conflicting obligations renders the monarch a puppet by choice, default in royal covenant obligations as if non-existent. Today the monarch serves as a consumer and not as mediator in conflicts of interest and disputes between common and statute laws. She presides in name only, distancing herself from making checks and balances that moral leadership demands, that the word reign implies. She doesn't even speak up about or speak to ill conditions of slavery, war and want. But she's the head of the Church, so that its bishops don't speak up either. Bishops of the Church of England are also silent, especially with Tavistock across the street from the Archbishop of Canterbury's office. Whereas she vowed to protect and support the Church of England, she sits quietly and allows Tavistock, which her grandfather King George V along with Kaiser Wilhelm helped establish, to degrade, discount, demean and dishonour Britain's covenant epitomized by the Stone of Scone under St. Edward the Confessor's chair. But also British culture and law, in direct violation of her coronation vows. Queen Elizabeth signed 6 Lisbon treaties that gave away her sovereign prerogatives, practically behind closed doors and without the consent of the British peoples, to EU management by distant, impersonal entities, unelected and unrepresentative of Britain. She has reduced herself to the status of CEO of the United Kingdom Corporation. Technically, there is nothing royal about royals who join the EU, because the EU rules, but no monarch has the authority to combat conflicts of interest caused by EU legislation. And so, the royal monarchs all sit together as peers who all still pretend to be sovereigns, having dominion even over themselves, while they are all yet subject to EU top-down legislation. Britain's Queen serves as hostess and greeter, or she may send in a look-alike doppelganger lady-in-waiting. Effectively, she is in the hospitality business. She entertains for the state and she reads my government's goals without challenge or question. City of London. Inns of Court. The Bar. She stands silent and servile before the Inns of Court that run dual and twisted legalist systems combining common law and maritime statutes without regard to effects on working classes. Her Majesty's relationship to the Vatican, despite cautions embedded in the 1689 Bill of Rights that imbue a separate but equal status upon Her Majesty and the Pope, ignores the reality of infiltrating practices of Jesuit and occult chivalric orders into UK society. Namely, Order of the Garter, of the Thistle, of the Bath and of St. John the Divine, Knights of Malta, and the Committee of 300, among others. Even if the present Pope is an honourable man, the next one could be another problem identity, because Popism falls into factions Christian, Satanic and Luciferian. And everybody knows religion is a problem requiring clarity, facilitation skills and wisdom coming from leadership for peace to obtain. Immigration. Her Majesty and the entire royal family distances themselves from effects of treaties she has signed that abrogate and annul sovereign human rights and economic parity of British citizenry in favour of an EU invasion of foreign minorities that literally threaten to take over the UK, namely, the same Quranic imams and scholars that historically by dogma and doctrine have always sought to conquer Western society. And again, due to confusion over the trafficking of persons between UN, EU, Quranic, Talmudic limits against women, children and dissidents and faith and thinking boundaries, which Her Majesty left in place and never speaks to, her children are found to be in just one scandal after another for vicarious profits. Mainstream media endlessly discuss and gossip about prurient escapades. The fact is, Prince Andrew is single, he can date whoever he wants post-puberty, and hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So even when no crime has technically been committed, there is staged uproar in the media. Added effort to confuse the political strategy of dominance introducing disinfo and misinfo in the Kingdom of David Israel Britain. Lie number 1 is that the United Kingdom has only been in existence since 1603, that it has no basis in religion at all, nor does the Anglican Communion have coherent history, back to Scotland, back to Irish kings before the Roman invasion. This is not true, but the history is hidden. Line number 2 is that Roman maritime laws of the sea and laws of the Admiralty including the EU Code are just as legal and reasonable in utility for humane relations in trust situations as they are for people in relations where there is no trust at work in relationship. This is false. Common laws are for people who know each other. Lie number 3 is that it's reasonable to set the two sets of law against each other in the bar associations, without ever having articulated them as discrete sets or pay any attention to the chaos that is created in relationships by maritime law. Lie number 4 is that citizens of a nation can be treated as cattle who are not privy to two distinct sets of law and their contents as to who has dominion or sovereign status. Lie number 5 is that law ought to be so voluminous and complicated a nation best not try to teach its stipulations to citizens directly, but rather require a profession of legal experts who profiteer on legal predicaments they can create by virtue of their special knowledge. This is outrageous upon the working people. Lie number 6 is the Bar Association Inns of Court definition of a person engaging one of the experts is imbecile, even though barristers and lawyers themselves cannot command all sets of legalisms. The costs of maritime courts are too burdensome to bear. Lie number 7 is that a nation can live by liberty and dominion. It sets a profession of barristers, lawyers and legislators against its own peoples. Lie number 8 is that a reigning monarch has no responsibility to notice any of this treachery, who presumes no responsibility for serving as check and balance to restore the boundaries between law of the land trust and in occupancy versus law of the sea. In fact, common law justice was established among the bloodlines of Israel kings by Moses over Mount Horeb after the exodus from Egyptian slavery, and the kingdom's operations guaranteed that the outcomes of law would be win-win or pay-win in disputes and conflicts for and among the peoples themselves. Elitism was not permitted and the king had to abide by the same laws as everyone else. Common law, one version of laws of the land, have always had the purpose of protecting and restoring balance and justice of citizens and travelers who reside and live and work on the land in relationship in a nation and culture of people, in mutuality. The Irish Brehon system is another legal system in trust. Common law is based on truth-telling among people who already know each other. But what about the covenant for the kingdom in Britain? How did this royal family come about it? Did they keep it, lose it, or throw it away? Covenant is not even mentioned in the entire Buckingham Palace website. What is the truth about the Leah Fail, the Stone of Destiny, the Coronation Stone? It is here. https://www.yawatube.com web link. v=yltqdertcu. Written history going back 2600 plus years has been with us all along. In the Jewish diaspora, the tribal line of Judah set up residence in Ireland. Britain's monarchy goes back to Tara, Ireland beginning in 583 BC, to settlements where tribes of Dan and Judah saw the arrival of the prophet Jeremiah after Jerusalem's sacking, with King Zephaniah's two daughters, Teotefi and Sophia, among Celts and Gaels. Holy law-abiding culture according to Holy Law and Brehon law continued until St. Patrick converted Ireland to Christianity, and the royal bloodline moved to Iona, Scotland, where and when King Fergus moved the monarchy and its Leah Fail, about 500 AD. And then, when Edward I conquered Scotland, he moved the Leah Fail from Scotland to London in 1296 AD. I mean, if the crown is monarchy over the entire British Isles, then this is its true history, not the current version which places the beginning of the monarchy in 1603 AD. C. Hartons, Leslie, The Celtic Church in Britain, New York, Teach Services Incorporated, 2005. Davidi, Yair, The Tribes, The Israelite Origins of Western Peoples, 2009. Hebron, Israel. Russell Davis. Publishers. Hislop, Bishop Alexander, The Two Babylons, proved that Roman Catholic beliefs came from pagan Babylonian religion, Ontario, California. Chick Publications. Windsor-Cragg, E. Emily, Come. Let Us Make Man in Our Image, Charleston, South Carolina. Amazon.com. Publishers, 2014. Windsor-Cragg, Emily, Restoring the Kingdom of God to Sovereignty, San Bernardino, California. Amazon.com, Aug. 2014. 600 years after the Kingdom of David came to Britain, Jesus Christ established the more subtle ethics of the Irish Brehon system of law, in Judea, when he edited his father's holy Mosaic law to include personal applications and intentions, much as the Irish Brehon system of law was a personal legal relationship system characterized by mutual trust and reliability. Moreover, with the sacrifice of that innocent dissident Yeshua ben Joseph in 33 CE, the point was made that executing the innocent has no reason and no purpose in creating good and just outcomes for people. So Jesus in his teachings omitted capital punishment, just as in Irish Brehon law there was no capital punishment provision where human relations are in civil conflict. See Appendix 2, the Beatitudes and Teachings of Yeshua ben Joseph, no cruelty at all. Jesus had taught, Give therefore what is Caesar's to Caesar, but what is God's to God, the operating principle of the Christ, not subjection. As a vassal chattel to a Roman-styled corporate state by impersonal rules, policies, procedures and mechanistic practices as in maritime law, which is impersonal and in which there is no mutual expectation of trust. But, how did impersonal maritime law favoring elites overtake common laws of the land in the British Isles? Here is a legalist thumbnail history how maritime law won over common law in Britain in the 16th and 17th century. A handful of simultaneous elements changed law from the customary application of common laws of the land for the peoples of the land, to laws of the sea, of commerce, of corporate statutes. In the 16th century the Spanish Armada dominated the globe with conquest, and the time, Spain was the protector of Rome and Vatican. Spain and Italy serving a single military political unit. One of the popes in a papal bull, I believe it was Innocent, declared the Vatican owned every soul on earth. Nobody countered that claim by Anunnaki law. Henry VIII adopted the Protestant faith to get free of that statement, and he formed the Church of England to be able to say, no, they don't own us. Then with the founding of MI5, until by John Dee with collaboration of the Jesus Society of Jesuits, King James IV ordered the British Navy to conquer Spain at sea in battle with the Spanish Armada and destroy Spain's dominance, which he accomplished. Since that occurred at sea under laws of the sea, high maritime laws obtained, and thereafter, maritime laws become dominant over England as well, but Spain lost all claims and rights that they had won, under laws of the sea. England could now say, we've now taken away the ownership of humanity from the Vatican, and we are now ruling the world because we are in command of the Vatican by monetary dictates and commerce law. Queen Victoria continued in the tradition of exercising sovereign rights of her nation, but forever after, under a pretext that common Laws were still sovereign over the land, which was no longer the case. Today, like the U.S., the United Kingdom is not a common laws of the land covenant nation. It's a dingy world of British commerce and statute codes, and Her Majesty is merely its CEO. She threw out her crown when she signed 6 Lisbon treaties. These facts need to be known. Queen Elizabeth II is not a reigning monarch. She is a corporate mascot of the United Kingdom Corporation. Personal communication from historian Brian Zadden. If monarchy versus European Union hegemony, tyranny of predatory leadership arising out of confusion between maritime statutes and common laws. British monarchs have been silently presiding with assent to the presence of force-stupendous black hole quagmires, never speaking to their causes, effects, outcomes or reasons. 4 cases of malfeasance and obfuscation of the monarch: pedophilia and person trafficking, just bidness in maritime law, Quranic and Talmudic dogma, doctrine and rules, especially in UNESCO education policy. See Appendix 3. Elite control over politics and legislation is guaranteed by the blackmail of MPs for procuring porn and witnessing or participating in child abuse and slavery. But in maritime law there are no penalties for subjective harm arising from procuring a person as a service, except cash money, because maritime law is based on indifferent and impersonal social norms, that is, UN guidelines. And so, scandals arise and fall, but prosecutions for child trafficking, snuff porn, slavery and murder for body parts are few and far between. At the same time, prosecutions for truly victim-free crimes like smoking weed, selling raw milk, growing a garden in a wrong place or installing range catch barrels create harmless felons for prison industries that profit judges and stockholders of prisons and social services. Revenue enhancement is now the primary goal of agencies charged with peace and public safety, right under the nose of the Queen, who maintains her schedule of visits to the poor but never addresses their problems or terrors. Royal visits always comprise shallow chit-chat, as a matter of policy. Debt and class bankruptcies arise out of bank usury, fiat debt financing and bank fraud, Ponzi schemes and collection scams characteristic of the fiat debt banking combine, whose runaway inflation has impoverished every worker in the world. Serial wars for profits and profits occur because defense contractors and paid mercenary terrorists are free from legal accountability under maritime law and covert paramilitary operations. Radiological contamination by depleted uranium. Depleted uranium trade. There is no excuse for this by a royal monarch who boos about ecological balance. Such a level of hypocrisy, overlooking 4 elephants in the room, belies any claim of leadership skill. Conclusions. Britain is now a vassal region of a top-down dictatorial hegemony that operates from laws of the sea in Belgium. It's primarily a banker-dominated cabal in control by covert intel, Mossad-led and Masonic blackmail, assassination and psych-ops worldwide. This means, common laws against harm, deceit, fraud, waste and abuse are inoperative because business as usual takes precedent over justice, and violence is profitable. Therefore, the teachings of Quran and Talmud with respect to abuse of women and children, sexual slavery, sex and snuff porn, female genital mutilation and all the terrors of Islam, plus a caste system of insiders versus outsiders as promulgated in the Talmud, plus wholesale slaughter of innocents staged by terrorist mercenaries is permitted by radicals under the Equality of Religion Statute of the UN and EU charters, all of which are legal to the extent these practices cannot and will not be prosecuted by courts of the land. Indeed, terrorism is staged to keep all people intimidated and in subjection. Fie on this. Never mind, corporate hegemony is killing the planet with chemicals, contracted diseases and contaminated vaccines, and blaming the working people all the while. Totalitarianism and terrorism have come to Britain, and there is no reason for these to ever cease, because blackmail, assassinations and trafficking against dissenters can keep a legalized crime syndicate in place for generations until and unless populations are energized or elites get lazy and let go of their power by leaving the world stage. This Queen Elizabeth II and her branch of the line of David let it happen, and they have been in silent collusion the whole time, whereas my father said no, not this. Not more war, because he had spent 4 years on the ground in World War I know, not more financial manipulations. He was pro-labor. And I'm here to say to you, elites are just letting it happen unless this throne is turned over to a bloodline legal heir who serves the people, to correct these matters, with an education, training, God's grace and strong arm. Whatever that means of Almighty Sovereign YHVH, who with the Patriarch Jacob, forged this covenant so long ago. Vastly rich people didn't just let this happen. They also presided over the gagging of the media, the concealment of damage their own corporations caused by marketing and distributing contaminated medical pharmaceuticals, depleted uranium products, insecticides and genetically modified sterile seeds, and oil rig accidents uncorrected that BP oil company weaseled out of repairing. Today elites are planet killers, loose cannons ecologically, who call on the rest of us in this world to tighten our belts and take the blame. But what's happening to us, the English-speaking peoples of the world, hides behind a curtain of secrecy. Here www.holyconservancy.org web link. Get your complete Protocols of the Elders of Zion, Illuminist Playbook for Globalist New World Order Hegemony, 46 pages, 2-up, print landscape orientation. And Her Majesty either doesn't know anything about it or she's in on it. I figure, we only have weeks or months at best to stop the bankster war parties and their psychopathic hierarchy from starting another world war to comply with Albert Pike's confabulated prophecies of 3 world wars. Leaders who consent to this degradation of civil society must be taken aside and given a broom and a hovel, in exchange for their heinous acts. World War III. The final social cataclysm. https://www.yawatube.com web link. v=oiipvpyn.wikipedia.org web link. Nonlinear warfare is waged against us all by confusing what we can know. This is a deplorable way to keep peoples away from knowing anything true or not true. www.filmsforaction.org web link. A political control 2014 / journalists in the West are forbidden to tell what are true outcomes and not true hoaxed events. But elites either don't care or they are sanctioning this perfidious behavior. https://www.yawatube.com web link. v=ipwh77wt10. I believe Her Majesty ought to be explaining to us why she has not called attention to the Illuminati plans to control, dominate and clear this planet of its peoples via laws of marriage and bloodline. I made a copy of the Mosaic Law, which every king's offspring in the Kingdom of David is required to make, and it is here. www.holyconservancy.org web link. English Bill of Rights, 1689, an act declaring the rights and liberties of the subject and settling the succession of the crown. Re-established the monarchy. As a result of the Glorious Revolution. Avalon Project. Bill of Rights Institute.org web link. Act of Settlement, June 12, 1701, Great Britain. Act of Parliament that, since 1701, has regulated the succession to the throne of Great Britain. www.britannica.com web link. Royal Marriage Act of 1772, the Regency Collection. Georgian marriages. www.legislation.gov.uk web link. His Majesty's Declaration of Abdication Act, 1936, recognized and ratified the abdication of King Edward VIII and passed succession to his brother Prince Albert, Duke of York, who subsequently became King George, Virgin Islands, U.S. The act also excluded any possible future descendants of Edward from the line of succession. www.heraldica.org web link. On one hand, royals claim to follow the Christian practices of marriage and legitimate family, but on the other hand, Christian ethics are now substantially missing from UK state policies and party politics. See below. 8. Tavistock Institute was established and funded by King George V with Kaiser Wilhelm Quote, "The ideology of American foundations was created by the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations in London. In 1921, the Duke of Bedford, Marquess of Tavistock, the 11th Duke, gave a building to the Institute to study the effect of shell shock on British soldiers who survived World War I. Its purpose was to establish the breaking point of men under stress, under the direction of the British Army Bureau of Psychological Warfare, commanded by Sir John Rawlings Rees. Tavistock Institute is headquartered in London. Its prophet, Sigmund Freud, settled in Maresfield Gardens when he moved to England. He was given a mansion by Princess Bonaparte. Tavistock's pioneer work in behavioral science along Freudian lines of controlling humans established it is the world center of foundation ideology. Its network now extends from the University of Sussex to the U.S. through the Stanford Research Institute, Salem, MIT, Hudson Institute, Heritage Foundation, Center of Strategic and International Studies at Georgetown, where State Department personnel are trained, U.S. Air Force Intelligence, and the Rand and Mitre corporations. The personnel of the corporations are required to undergo indoctrination at one or more of these Tavistock-controlled institutions. A network of secret groups, the Mont Pelerin Society, Trilateral Commission, Ditchley Foundation, and the Club of Rome is conduit for instructions to the Tavistock network. Tavistock Institute developed the mass brainwashing techniques which were first used experimentally on American prisoners of war in Korea. Its experiments in crowd control methods have been widely used on the American public, a surreptitious but nevertheless outrageous assault on human freedom by modifying individual behavior through topical psychology. A German refugee, Kurt Lewin, became director of Tavistock in 1932. He came to the U.S. in 1933 as a refugee, the first of many infiltrators, and set up the Harvard Psychology Clinic, which originated the propaganda campaign to turn the American public against Germany and involve us in World War II. In 1938, Roosevelt executed a secret agreement with Churchill which in effect ceded U.S. sovereignty to England, because it agreed to let Special Operations Executive control U.S. policies. To implement this agreement, Roosevelt sent General Donovan to London for indoctrination before setting up OSS, now the CIA, under the aegis of SOSIS. The entire OSS program, as well as the CIA, always worked on guidelines set up by the Tavistock Institute. Tavistock Institute originated the mass civilian bombing raids carried out by Roosevelt and Churchill purely as a clinical experiment in mass terror, keeping records of the results as they watched the guinea pigs reacting under controlled laboratory conditions. All Tavistock and American Foundation techniques have a single goal: to break down the psychological strength of the individual and render him helpless to oppose the dictators of the world order. Any technique which helps to break down the family unit, and family-inculcated principles of religion, honor, patriotism, and sexual behavior, is used by the Tavistock scientists as weapons of crowd control. The methods of Freudian psychotherapy induce permanent mental illness in those who undergo this treatment by destabilizing their character. The victim is then advised to establish new rituals of personal interaction, that is, to indulge in brief sexual encounters which actually set the participants adrift with no stable personal relationships in their lives, destroying their ability to establish or maintain a family. Unquote. The very idea that Her Majesty hasn't been aware of the deleterious effects of Tavistock propaganda upon the moral and ethical foundation of Britain is simply beyond cognition. She can't be that stupefied. Neither can she be that blind to the reality that Tavistock's mandate is to undo Christian ethics in toto. But here Elizabeth II is head of the Church of England. 7. UNESCO's Common Core Sex Curricula. Never mind morality. Quote, teachings. The Common Core curriculum encourages parents to be supportive and open-minded to gender identity and sexual orientation, and discourages them from enforcing traditional gender identities. Confusion about these issues and fear of homosexuality. Homophobia has caused many parents and other adults to limit how girls and boys express themselves. One curriculum asks parents to refrain from teaching children about morality, as there are no right and wrong values, while another model curriculum asks parents to address contradictions in religious approaches and rights-based approaches. Perhaps the most disturbing of the curricula asks parents to foster early sexual development by encouraging children to experience genital pleasure from birth until age 2 and by age 3, to encourage sex play. The report also heavily promotes the encouragement of abortion and lists the International Planned Parenthood Federation and other abortion advocacy organizations as references. Her Majesty's vow, remember? Will you, to the utmost of your power, maintain the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel? Or did we all forget that the limits and boundaries on sexual behavior have the outcome of protecting bloodline families, because Christianity is about maintaining bloodline families from generation to generation and from millennium to millennium, and so, in the effort to protect family vows and covenants, we do abridge and edit our sexual behavior voluntarily. But has Her Majesty demanded that Britain's Christians be allowed to opt out from the teachings of profligate sexual behavior in the face of Common Core curricula contradictions? Not a word. Moreover, Common Core teachings justify pedophilia and resultant blackmail coerce certain adults who buy in to fail and fall in their reputations. Indeed, it is very easy to blackmail an elite who has opted in to profligate sexual practices. This is how totalitarianism gets its foothold, its control over individuals. www.thenewamerican.com web link 631 UNESCO reports sex guidelines for kids from birth. 8 parties of the first part. Pictures of father and grandson Edward at age 22. The complainant is daughter of King Edward VIII, who became the Duke of Windsor when he fled and then was exiled from his home country, who ruled for only 10 months among his enemies. Her books at Amazon cover Earth's E.T. history, history of hierarchy and law. www.amazon.com web link, Restoring the Kingdom of God to Sovereignty, www.amazon.com web link, and other volumes of Community Development, Conspiracies and Crafts, 17 inches all. Emily Elizabeth Windsor-Cragg, born in 1944 inches Edward's 50th year, is educated and trained in group problem-solving, conflict and dispute analysis and IT. See her profile at linkedin.com. 5 grown children, Heather Ann, Andrew, Dana Jeanette, Edward Scott and Stephen Walter. 4 with university degrees. Command skills in IT, hospitality, permaculture, military security and logistics. No one in our family has ever been charged with a crime. To date, only one was divorced and remarried. 9 grandchildren are all healthy and somewhat gifted. What's going on with the Windsor family succession? Edward violated the 1772 Marriage Act by marrying a divorcee who was secretly a double MI5 agent in the employ of King George V during WWI, serving as intermediary between the king and his German cousin Kaiser Wilhelm, as well as with the eldest son, Adolf. As a result, Parliament, knowing the secret, passed an act that removed Edward's royal privileges and all of any issued children he may have ever had. There's reason to believe from a king's story, that if Edward ever found out who and what Wallace was, it never seemed to show up in his writings, and his efforts to regain the throne were pitiful and few and consisted of some negotiations with Germans, who were in charge anyway. Now, Charles has violated the exact same act, and his present wife has Catholic connections, also forbidden by law. So, it appears to me that the royals can do one of 2 things by lawful precedent: cut Charles and his kids off William, Harry and George, as happened before to Edward, or, by rescinding the special act against Edward, place Charles back in the line of succession, except for one matter: rescinding that act would restore me and my bloodline as members, albeit illegitimate, of the family, the bloodline of which I live in God's sight by blood. Proof of family line of descent. Not having access to samples of my parents' blood, I have not yet undergone the sort of DNA test that establish parenthood. But of course, I will do so when enabled to do so. Porphyria, disease of the bloodline. People ask me how I know I'm Edward, Duke of Windsor's daughter. I have the congenital blood condition called porphyria, the symptoms of which are noted and suffered by Elizabeth I's reign, which sidelined King George III. Also notable carriers both George V and his wife, Maytek, both of whom were direct descendants of Geo III, were my grandparents on my father's side. I have it, my son Andrew and his daughter Jessica have a variant of it. No way that disease arises out of the blue. It's by genetics alone. I'm in the bloodline, sidelined, scapegoated and disinherited through no fault of my own. And she, Her Majesty, has lost her moorings, insofar as justice with mercy, to the covenant with God. No, I do not sacrifice babies, to keep going. No need to harm anyone. Emily Windsor-Cragg.